Welcome to this video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the Blancpain series on iRacing. This week we head to the undulating challenge that is Road Atlanta, where I'll be looking at a lap driven by myself, David Williams, with the Audi R8 GT3, for which I've driven in default afternoon weather to match the official series. I'll play the lap in full for you first before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was 1 minute 19.652. Starting off then from the list of available data packs on the VRS website, we're going to choose the Audi with the Blancpain Sprint Series, and we're going to choose week 3. This will load up the session details, where of course you can download the lap files, the replay and the race setup. I'm just going to click on Learn Track, which will load up the driving analyzer, and it should start to play the lap through shortly. I'm just going to pause it here and show you what we can see. You can see the steering angle inputs here. You can also see the speed, the brake and throttle inputs. Obviously here we're just 100% and 0 brake, and live driving inputs as well. So I'm just going to play this. This is the run to the first corner, where obviously you want to keep the car over to the left hand edge of the circuit, and you want to be preparing yourself for braking into turn 1. You've got this wall to your left here which is going to end. You want to be braking just before then. You've also got this grass which ends exactly where the wall ends, and finally you've got a patch of visible area of lighter discoloration on the track surface itself. So I'm just going to play this through. And you can see here I'm braking not too aggressively. It's a very fast corner this, so about 50% is my peak brake pressure, and you can see that I'm bleeding off the brakes as I turn in more and more, and also as the downforce decreases as well and I lose a little bit of grip. So we'll just play that through. You want to get the car on a nice wide arc, don't turn in too aggressively initially. In fact, you can see here where I've turned in, I've just briefly straightened up the wheel, and that's because the car is rotating via the rear tyres really. So as soon as you turn in, just feel the car rotating and make sure that you don't oversteer by turning in too aggressively. So you really want to be nice and smooth with those steering inputs and bleed off the brake as you sort of approach the apex here, which is going to be at this curb. So you can see that I've hooked up with a nice apex here. You don't want to get on this curb too aggressively. You're carrying a lot of speed here and it can unsettle the car. And you'll notice as I've apexed, I've picked up the throttle fairly quickly, but I've not committed, and this is important, I've not committed to full throttle straight away. So if we just play that through, I'm in 4th gear as well. I've picked it up to about 75%, where I've held it, and I'm now just hesitating, trying to feel for the grip, feeling the car, and I don't want to run too wide. So I'm just waiting for the car to grip up through the exit, which it will do. The circuit goes up the hill, so you actually have a surprising amount of grip through the exit here. But you don't want to run too wide. I do get quite close to that curb because you want to bring the car back over to the right-hand side, not fully. You'll notice that I get sort of 50% a few cars widths away from the edge, so you don't need to be any wider than that really, but try and make an effort to bring the car back to open up the next sequence, which is going to be turns 2 and 4. Now I'll just switch this back to the onboard view, just pause it, and in terms of a reference here, you want to be looking at this tree on the left, and as you approach this crest, because obviously it's a blind entry into turn 2 here, you want to be trying to spot the curb on the left as early as possible, and you pretty much need to start turning left before then to anticipate where the curb will appear. And you can also see here that I've started to lift out of the throttle as well. Now you can see that I kind of lift quite abruptly. You don't have to do this, it's entirely my driving style. But as I play it through here, I'm just trying to control the speed, not carry too much speed into here, but I've not actually started braking yet until the curb begins on the left. Now that's pretty much going to be my braking point into what is essentially turn 3, the next right-hander. And you'll notice that I positioned the car quite nicely here. I've got it fully over to the left-hand side, but again, I'm not actually on the curb here. So I've started braking now. Again, don't brake too aggressively here, the car gets a little bit light, the circuit crests, and once again you're trying to spot another blind corner here, a blind apex. So you want to be looking at this fairly tall tree in the distance, I guess, as a reference, and we'll play it through. Pretty much just guessing when to turn in. You'll need to practice this, get into a good rhythm, and get your timing right. So you want to adjust your timing each lap until you get it consistently right. So we'll play it through. We're down into 3rd gear, and now I'll actually tell you that I could have turned in a little bit sooner here. So this is a curb that you can actually ride a lot more aggressively than I've done so here. So you can actually get the whole car fully onto this white curb. The issue is if you cut it too much, you will get an off-track penalty. And also just be aware that this is quite an aggressive curb, even though it's quicker to use it. So you want to be very careful when you pick up the throttle, as I'm doing so here as I apex. Now we'll just play it through, just allow the car, keep the car nice and straight, and don't be aggressive with the throttle, because you're carrying obviously momentum through this corner. You have a little bit of an upset car as it comes off that curb. So you want to be careful with the throttle, and also you want to immediately bring the car to the left hand side so that you keep it tight as you travel down the hill now. So you see that I only briefly reach full throttle there. I'm just trying to do this by feel really, before immediately backing out again as I've dropped into the left-hander. Now I don't want to commit to too much throttle because I want to keep the car nice and tight here. I don't want to run out too wide. If I run out too wide, it will ruin my entry into the tricky downhill S's. Now as it loads the next sector here, I'm just going to pause it and show you that I've positioned the car fully over to the edge of the circuit again, right near this curb, to open up the downhill as much as possible, which will allow me to carry as much speed down the hill as possible. But despite this, I'm still not able to maintain full throttle. So you can see that I've lifted out, I'm bleeding to about 60% here. We'll play it through, up into 5th gear, and you'll notice that I've avoided that curb on the inside here. So I've got really close to it, I'm hugging it, but I've not actually made contact with it. Now you can make contact with it, but just be aware that it will upset the car, so you might need to deal with some oversteer, and it potentially will cost you time as well. So you see that I've now committed to full throttle, the car grips up, the circuit starts to come back up the hill, so the car compresses into the track. And if you've got your line right and you're positioned well, you can take advantage of that and commit to full throttle. Now this curb on the left you can ride, which you can see that I'm doing, as long as you keep the wheel nice and straight, trying to keep the car nice and settled. Up the hill now in towards the tricky braking zone for turn 5. Now you see that I start to brake here before I reach the curb on the right hand side, and again I'm not braking that aggressively, even though it's an uphill braking zone, and the reason being is I'm braking partly on the curb, which you can see here, and I don't want to upset the balance of the car because I need the car to be nice and planted as I reach the apex. So again, another really fast corner, so you just want to try and get the car slowed down enough but try and maintain good momentum. So I've also turned in fairly early here, and you can see I'm getting close to the apex curb, but again avoiding actually making contact with it. Now the curb on the exit is very wide. It is quite aggressive, but you can actually take advantage of it to carry a wider exit line with more speed. But you can see here I'm picking up the throttle really carefully, and I'm waiting until the car is straight. I've got the wheel straight now. There was a slight correction which you can see in the steering trace as I correct for oversteer as I commit to full throttle, and you can see here how much curb I'm using. Now I wouldn't want to use more curb than that. You can get away with using more curb than that, but it upsets the car enough to actually cost you time down the following straight. So a very simple straight, just gradually bring the car over to the left hand side. Just play it through here. Now there is a braking marker here, 200 meter marker. There's also a horizontal white painted line. That's going to be my braking point. Now this is an uphill braking zone, so you can brake really aggressively initially. And you can see that my peak brake pressure here is about 80%. But I start bleeding off quite early on, pretty much immediately as soon as I start braking, because I'm turning in, and you can really take an early turn in here. There's a lot of camber at the apex. You want to get the car in nice and early to take advantage of the extra grip. If you turn in a bit too late and start running wide, you tend to lose a lot of time. So you see that I'm also trail braking here. So I finished my main braking, if you want to call it that. I'm now trail braking so that I keep the front end loaded up and I don't run wide. And you can see here I'm also again hugging the inside curb but avoiding making too much contact with it. Just play it through, carefully picking up the throttle. Again, I don't want to run wide here. I reach full throttle for a brief moment, and then there isn't really a braking reference here, unfortunately, other than this dirty area in the grass just before that finishes, but it's quite vague. I tend to be looking at my apex at this point, and it's okay to brake on the curb. Just make sure that you don't have any wheels off into the grass, because obviously that will cause you some real problems. So again, braking quite hard initially. I'm going to drop down into second gear, fairly late turn in. We want a good exit here, so you want to really set the car up for a nice exit. So you want to try and square the corner off, fairly late turn in. Again, holding the brakes into the apex and picking up the throttle quite carefully. That's kind of a characteristic of this car. It really rotates well from the rear end, so you want to be careful and gentle as you pick up the throttle, especially considering we're in second gear here, so we're heavily traction limited. Obviously the car has traction control, but you still want to be careful with it. Open the steering up. Small correction for oversteer. Just try and anticipate that you might have some oversteer here through the exit, and just open the car up. There is a flat curb which you can just run through the exit as long as you've got the car nice and straight and settled by that point. Take it back to cockpit view, and I'm going to take it to normal playback speed as it loads the next sector. Fairly straightforward, just try and take the path of least resistance, gradually bring the car over to the right hand side where you're going to be braking down the hill into the final chicane. Now there are some braking references here for you to use, which is very useful. You've got this 100 meter marker on the right hand side. I'm just going to mute it and slow it down to half speed. Now this is by far the heaviest braking zone on the whole circuit, so you can really afford to get on the brakes super hard initially, and then as the downforce comes off, gradually bleed off those brakes. So don't turn in too early, keep the car out, and then roughly halfway along the curb on the outside is when I'm going to turn in, which will be where I start to release the brakes. Now you see here again, I don't fully release the brakes, I just hold on to the brakes a little bit, about 10%, just to keep the front end loaded up. Now I don't want to miss the first apex, and when I say I don't want to miss the first apex, I really want to get aggressively on this curb, so you can really attack this first curb. It's really flat, and this is by far the fastest line. Obviously the only real concern again is avoiding getting an incident. if you cut it too much. So again, picking up the throttle quite carefully. We don't want to run too wide here, so you really want to keep the car over to the left hand side to open up the next right hander, and if you do that nicely, you can really carry decent amount of speed up the hill, which then leads into the final corner, which is almost flat out. Sometimes it is flat out. You can see that I've just caught the curb here through the exit. Now that was a very late apex, as you can see, which allows me to really carry the speed up the hill, open the car up, open the steering up. You can see as I've committed to full throttle, I've also opened the steering up, and I'm allowing the car to run out onto this curb here. Obviously the exit's blind, so just take directly underneath the bridge as your line and look out for this curb here. You want to run the car all the way out to where this curb ends, really opens the last corner up, and that will allow you to carry as much speed as possible, where you want to start turning in quite early. So as soon as that curve finishes, basically you want to start turning in. Now you see here I haven't managed to make it through here flat out, so I've just feathered slightly, and it's just allowing me a little bit of safety margin. Again, you can actually take it flat out through here, but it's risky and it's probably not a good strategy for a race lap, as the tyres will go off and you'll probably get oversteer through there. The tyres are obviously really loaded up there. And again, getting close to my apex curb, but avoiding making contact with it and opening the car up to finish the lap across the line. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book coaching, including group classes with world champions from the likes of Koanda Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.